Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm Josh Williams, and I'm joined by, as ever, by David Hughes. Dave, how's things?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you, mate. How are you?
I'm good. We're looking fresher. You've got a bit of a tan on. Both got haircuts, so looking healthier times, mate. Healthier times, and hopefully the same can be said for Liverpool on the pitch. Obviously, this is the second week in a row, actually, where we've recorded after what feels like a bit of a flat result, despite Liverpool generally picking up, I suppose you could label them as good Premier League wins. But it feels like Aston Villa was a while ago, so in this episode, we were going to skip Aston Villa a little bit at Real Madrid, and we're going to look ahead to Leeds, as well as just general other pointers along the way, really. So yeah, we'll start with Real Madrid. Obviously, Liverpool are now out the Champions League, sadly. But I think it could have the tie could have worked out differently if maybe the Anfield leg was first and we'd played that first leg last night, because based on that first leg, at least it looked like Liverpool were the better team, I suppose. Simple as that, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought Liverpool were the better team, and you know they created enough chances to win the game. You know, it might not be captured solely in say the XG numbers, but you know, if you watch the game, you saw the shooting opportunities created. If you look at the non-shot XG as well, it was really high, which is obviously dependent on kind of things like, you know, important actions made the opposition's goal. I think of all the quarterfinals last night, certainly the second legs, Liverpool at the highest non-shot XG. You know, they were definitely the better side. And I think on another night, a couple of those chances, you know, end up being goals. And for example, I think Josh, that one in the opening few minutes, I feel like if that goes in, it's probably going to pan out to be a different tie, isn't it? But it never, and the goal just did come in the end.
Yeah, and you know, this is immeasurable. You know, we can't put a figure on this, but I do think that it's very easy to say it now. But I think that for some reason, in a packed stadium, I just feel like one of those goes in. I don't really know why. Maybe it's just kind of like the fans just empowering the players, or just sucking the ball into the net, essentially. But I do feel like it was the exact type of performance that typically involves a Liverpool comeback in a European tie, just without the goals. And I feel like those goals can happen, and more mistakes on the opposition side can happen if you've got real atmosphere in the ground. But obviously, it's getting played like a training game, and it's just difficult to kind of to establish that level of intensity needed to overturn a 2-goal deficit against the European 3-time champion. Really, it's still very much the same team. We're recording so quickly after the game yesterday. This is an 11 a.m. recording the following day, that our usual provider of expected goals doesn't actually have the numbers posted on the website yet. So I'm not sure exactly what the XG was. But I think, based on other providers, less great providers, let's say, you know, Liverpool did win the battle for XG, but probably not by as much as you'd think, based on what I saw. Like Real Madrid had virtually any shots. I think they had about 6 or so. I'll double check that now. Shots that they did have were quite clear cut. Like, you think of the Vinicius Junior 1-on-1. And I think they had another quite a clear-cut chance in the box as well.
They had one that deflected onto the post, didn't they?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, they had 6 shots. Liverpool had 15. Obviously, that captures Liverpool's, I suppose, dominance on the day. Liverpool had the edge on possession as well, 57% possession. And I think just generally, despite the lack of goals, obviously, I do think the performance was really, really good. You know, it's difficult to criticise, because I think Liverpool did enough performance-wise to win the game by the amount needed to progress, but we just didn't put the ball in the net.
Yeah, I'm just having a quick look now, and On average, Real Madrid have conceded roughly 8.6 shots per 90 this season, all competitions, and Liverpool 15, pretty much double that amount they attempted. You can't do a lot wrong really there if you're creating twice as many shots against a team that normally concede roughly around 8 or 9. You're creating 15. That's good going, and as I said, it just didn't seem to fall their way. In front of goal, some big chances missed by, like Salah. I think Salah missed 2. One felt quite big, the early one, but even the second one, it wasn't a sitter by any means. But not even to get that one on target where he puts it over the bar is frustrating from a Liverpool point of view. Wijnaldum had a really good chance as well. And, Wijnaldum's kind of low key, quite clinical at times in those moments. He scored some really good goals, hasn't he, from those positions for Liverpool and obviously Holland. So yeah, just as I said, it just felt like another night that could have been the kind of perfect comeback performance. Really, just didn't fall away. Here's an interesting one, Josh. What was I'm only going to ask you. I wouldn't normally put you on the spot on a match XG from 2 years ago, but obviously because it was a big game. Can you remember what the XG was on the Barcelona game?
I'll double check now.
Because all I'm thinking is it. Come on.
I was going to say a few of the goals were headers, weren't they? And they're generally, weighted a little bit less because it's difficult to score a header in comparison to a goal with your foot. So
yeah,
I don't think it'll be that high, but I'll check now.
I just think it'd be quite interesting, wouldn't it? Just to explain to people at home if the XG on that was fairly similar on the day. Have you got it in front of you now? Because I think I've got it here now.
Yeah, so it was only 1.8 Liverpool's XG against Madrid. Barcelona's 1. Exactly,
and the Real Madrid game is going to be in and around that same figure. I think maybe marginally lower. But that just captures, it is such fine margins that normally dictate these games. And in terms of the performance that was needed, Liverpool did provide it. But the fine margins they just didn't have. That being these chances going into the back of the net. And then the other factor that you alluded to at the start where, fans aren't there. And one thing I will say to Madrid, I thought they very rarely looked rattled, even when Liverpool were creating chances against them. There wasn't tons of panic. And whilst that's a kind of compliment to them, you'd also think, would that have been the case if it was like 50 or 1,000 and they're really down the throats? Would it be as easy to stay as composed? So when you're looking at, when you consider all things, you're looking at Real Madrid, Liverpool, who are two very similar teams in terms of standard. And Liverpool started the game 2-0 down, pretty much. Well, at least a 2-goal margin down. They didn't have the home support, another thing that would have been in the favour, and they probably didn't just have the rub of the green as well in front of goal. And those three things obviously impacted the results and their ability to turn the tie around.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of further perspective on it. The 6 shots that Real Madrid posted is the fewest that they've posted all season in all competitions. It's the only time all season that they've only taken 6 shots. They took 7 against Villarreal, 8 against Osasuna, 9 against Levante and Celta Vigo, but again, only the 6 against Liverpool. And the Real Madrid podcast that I appeared on last week, again, I was switching DMs with the lad again during the game, and he said it's probably the worst game of the season for Kroos and Modric. Probably the worst game that they've played all season. And although that could be a product of, fatigue, they faced Liverpool last week, then they faced Barcelona on the weekend, now they're facing Liverpool again. I do think it was also a product of just Liverpool's counter-pressing being a lot more on point than it was last week. And I think that was part of the reason why Klopp selected the team that he did. Obviously, there was a bit of clamour around the first 11. That was selected. Thiago obviously on the bench, Jota on the bench. Was you surprised, Dave? Or
I was a little bit, yeah. Because just from the outset, without talking about any tactical intricacies or game plan. You think get your forwards on the pitch. You know, Jota, who's been in really good form. I know he didn't score against Villa, but he's been in a real hot streak. You want him on the pitch. I know he didn't do much in the first leg, but I think ideally you want to try and get all 4 forwards on if you can, but he didn't. And then Thiago done fairly well when he come on last week.
Yeah, I think he'll have selected the team, but especially based on what happened last week. I think he'll have just picked a team that is defensively and pressing wise really, really good in the 4-3-3. Obviously, Milner's been there since Klopp arrived at the club. Firmino has been there the same since Klopp arrived at the club. Whereas Jota and Thiago, although they might offer a bit more on the ball, they're still relatively new. And, you know, the pressing game of those two players, it's not as ingrained as it is in the other players that I've just mentioned. So I think Klopp will have gone into this game thinking, you know, if we're going to get through, we're probably going to need some form of clean sheet or at least very close to it. We obviously got that. And then around the hour mark, obviously Klopp kind of give the risk a little bit of a boost by introducing players who are maybe less defensively drilled, but more unpredictable on the ball in Thiago and Jota. So I could see the issues around it, especially after, you know, needing to bring on Thiago last week after about 41 minutes. So I understood the clamour around it, but I don't think it was that as big of a deal for me as it was for some other people, especially when you consider that, you know, Liverpool have just faced Villa. Quite an intense game. We've got Leeds next. Probably the most intense team in the league. So, and we're still going for other stuff like top 4. So, you know, if you're playing all 4 forwards, you don't want that burnout. You don't want them to pick up an injury or anything like that. So, and then the tactical dynamics of from the keeping a clean sheet perspective. So, I understood the starting lineup a little bit, like, although that's just my guesswork on it. Although Klopp did mention the whole risk thing in his pre-match press conference. But yeah, I thought Real Madrid defended really well. You know, I thought they soaked pressure really well, even though they had a makeshift back line. It's interesting that Militao played because he's just a centre back that I think, from a Liverpool perspective, Liverpool should be not necessarily tracking, but just keeping an eye on, because he, for whatever reason, Zidane doesn't seem that keen on him. He always seems to play well against Liverpool. Played well against Liverpool for Porto a few seasons ago, and he just might become available. You just never know. And Liverpool need a centre back. So, have you got any thoughts on Militao, Dave?
Yeah, it's not a bad shout. The only thing I'm thinking is, you know, how old is he now? He's still fairly. Let me bring it up. I'm just wondering if maybe. Go on, sorry. What was sorry?
23.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking maybe with potentially, you know, obviously that defence is, Varane's still a good age, but you got Ramos. I don't know if maybe they're just thinking a little bit more long term with him, but I saw a lot on social media afterwards where people who kind of, you know, heavy observers of La Liga trying to say it was the performance was quite a middle finger to Zidane in terms of, you know, just how well he done, and a reminder that he's a good player. So I don't know if that might be the start of him featuring more for them, or whether it will just be a case of, you know, him putting himself on the radar of some top sides, and Liverpool could well be one of them. It's an option, because are you any further down the line with where you stand with, say, Kabak, for example? Have you changed your opinion from a few weeks ago when we last spoke, or are you still saying?
No, I think I haven't really changed much on that one. I as I said at the time, I feel lower than most fans on him. That's not to say I think he's bad or anything like that. I just feel like Liverpool, you know, current at least English Premier League champions and stuff, I just feel like Liverpool can do better. And the reason I say that is, you know, it should always be judged on Liverpool being, in my opinion, a European giant. So if you look at Kabak, can you picture that player for Bayern Munich, for Real Madrid, Barcelona? I'm not sure on that one. And I think when it comes to signings Liverpool make, the player either has to have world-class ability or world-class potential. And he certainly hasn't got world-class ability yet. And the world-class potential box, I'm unsure on. I don't know. Do you think he ticks that? I genuinely don't know. That's not me saying he doesn't. I'm not sure. And I feel like I'd want to be sure.
Yeah, no, I get
it's a difficult one.
Yeah, I think he's definitely not a bad player, and he's still so young that it's really hard to really hard to kind of conclusively, decide where you stand on it. So I do get that your struggles. That being said, do I think he goes into a team and suddenly you go, oof, that's a really good signing. Like obviously Konate's been getting linked with Liverpool, hasn't he? To me, that's a good move for Liverpool. I think he's going to really improve them, and he's going to be a top centre back for years to come. Do I think that with Kabak? No, not at the moment. I don't. But that's not to say I won't be proven wrong.
Yes, I think a player like Konate, has a higher ceiling. I think that's the thing. When I was just saying there about world-class ability, world-class potential, I think Konate just has more potential. A lot of it stems from just the physical attributes he has on his side. He's taller, more dominance in the air, at least the same speed. So not much against Kabak, but it's just a case of whether Liverpool can maybe do a little bit better. It's as simple as that. And I don't think it's a case of because he's now on loan, Liverpool should just kind of take the easy option and keep him. I think if we can identify someone who's better, I'd be inclined to chase that player, or at least see how much he's being valued at. I think one thing Kabak has on the side is the value attached to him. I think 18 million is quite fair, quite reasonable. So yeah, the jury's still out for me on that one. I'm not firmly in one camp, but just looking around at some of the comments made by the Liverpool fan base and stuff on Twitter, I have just looked at some of the comments and been a bit like, I must be lower on than that person.
Yeah, not seeing it type thing just yet.
Yeah, but one of the reasons I mentioned about Militao is because obviously Liverpool are approaching what feels like quite a big summer. And this season, I have tried to remain firmly in the camp of a rebuild, a big revamp or whatever isn't really needed. And it's just this season's more of a product of, the lack of fans, the lack of intensity, the lack of pre-season, the packed schedule. None of it favours Liverpool. Obviously, the injury crisis as well, massive. So it just hasn't been a great season for the things that make Liverpool what they are. So the whole revamp thing, I've tried to stay cool on, and I've been a bit like, yes, new players are needed in certain areas. We obviously need a new centre back, in my opinion. We need a new forward as well. But in terms of selling loads of players or starting again from scratch and things, I've tried to stay quite cool on that. But having said that, when I watch games like the one yesterday, Real Madrid, although we played well, it just does feel as though you need that kind of freshness, that I don't know, that new blood, if you know what I mean.
I do, yeah.
The average age of the team
last night.
Yeah, I mean, the average age of the team at the time last night, the starting 11 was between 27 and 28. It's not too bad. But the only players, I think, in the team below the age of 27, including subs, I think is Kabak. Kabak's on loan. Nat Phillips, probably not going to feature next season. Jota and Trent. Everybody else who played is 27 or over. And again, I've mentioned before on this pod, it doesn't complement well with Klopp's general identity as a coach in terms of being intense, legs, energy, vitality. The older a player gets, the less that is the case, if you see what I mean. So I don't know what you think about this whole... Have you got any thoughts on what I've just said? Basically, the whole revamp thing, because I'm on the fence with it while still trying to remain in the camp of this is just a mad season. Next season things will go a lot more back to normal, almost.
Yeah, but it could quite easily be a little bit of both, couldn't it? Because I also look at the team and just think it's not that it's necessarily really bad. It just the mechanics of the movements and the possession play just doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel as energized. It feels a little bit kind of routine blocky. It just doesn't seem to flow the same with the same kind of penetration. I really wish I could articulate the points better, but I can't at the moment. That's the best way I could kind of summarize. We did say as early as last year that this would come, this stage where it needed to change, and I'm not 100% saying myself that I think it's now, but based on if you were just trying to look at it based on what's happened on the pitch, it seems could finish anywhere between say third and sixth, maybe. So obviously that's a drop from where they've been over the last few years. You've already touched on the point that players are aging. I don't know. It just feels like there needs to be an injection of something fresh, just in different areas on the pitch. And not just about what's happening in the attacking third, just everywhere. Just I think people were hoping maybe Thiago would have brought that, and Thiago hasn't done bad at all. Obviously, he's a really good player, but I don't know if he's had that kind of transformational impact that maybe people were hoping he would have had when he was first getting linked and when we talked about him in the summer. Kind of bringing this real other dimension to Liverpool, and he definitely brings something different. I think we both agree on that, wouldn't we? But I don't feel like it's necessarily being a transformational impact on the side. Maybe that's too much pressure on one player, but maybe with that in mind, it's a case of bringing 2, 3, even 4 new faces in and potentially selling some of the, quote unquote, old guard. Sadio Mane looks really, really on the decline recently, whether it's just fatigue, because, talked about, I found a tweet yesterday that was dead interesting. Back in 2019, it was, so after Liverpool won the Champions League, and I'd said at the time, it'll be something along the lines of, it'll be interesting to see how Sadio Mane performs this season, because he's played well over 50 games in the Premier League and Champions League, really highly competitive games as well. You're going at it full throttle, because you remember the title race that year went to the final game. Liverpool go all the way to the Champions League final. He then went away with the African Cup of Nations. I think he got all the way to the final in that as well and got beat. Then he had 2 weeks off and come back for pre-season and went and did it again. Liverpool going all the way to win the title. So we had that, and then we had the lack of break and all the stuff that's come since with COVID. So he hasn't really had a break. And so I'm saying he's on the decline, but maybe he's just desperately fatigued, and maybe one or two other players are as well. And at the risk of rambling, which I feel like I am now, but I just think there's so many unknowns. In a normal season, you could probably summarize it better, but you can't. But even if it is fatigue, then maybe you just need a shot in the arm by changing things slightly for next season.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you've just said, really, and I think that's the difficult thing about this season, being able to accurately identify what the source of an issue is, and being able to identify what is likely to persist next season and what isn't. And Liverpool have been really good at doing that over the past few years. I think that's where most of a club's success stems from. If a club can accurately identify what it needs to fix and it consistently keeps doing that, that club should reach a point of success, because they've plugged all the holes that they needed to plug. So many times clubs end up, they go and buy a player that they don't really need, or they think that they need to fix this area when they really don't. And Liverpool have been great at doing that. But this summer, I think especially, is going to be really hard to do that, because of the number of different things this season that's been thrown at the team. I mentioned it before, but the centre-back issue, the lack of fans, the lack of pre-season, the intensity of the games just felt slower. How much of that is because of the players at Liverpool, and how much of that is because of stuff that is going to be on your side more next season. So it is difficult, but in particular, I'm glad you mentioned him then, Sadio Mane. I think out of everything that's happened to Liverpool, specifically since Christmas, his form is probably, I find his form as the most difficult to explain. It's it could just be fatigue, but watching him since Christmas has been really weird, really so weird, because he's just looked so far from the player, while also still doing a lot of what Mane did, if you know what I mean. It's really, really weird. Like, still receiving the ball in tight areas, still directly going at his man, still clearly difficult to defend, still threatening him behind, I suppose, to an extent, but while also becoming completely blunt at the same time. And his decision making in certain moments has been baffling. A lot less explosive in certain moments. Like there was a little moment yesterday I thought it kind of captured his form really, and captured what's happened to him a little bit. He got the ball on the flank and he was up against Rodrigo. Fair enough, Rodrigo was quick and he had just came on as well. But Mane kind of had the ball in what seemed like a good area, I think, and he stopped on the ball and then immediately started again. You know that stop-start that Mane can do quite well, that explosive burst of pace. And Rodrigo just took the ball off him. And the reaction of Mane, it didn't look hungry. It just kind of, he looked a bit defeated. So him losing the ball by not having the explosive pace in the moment, and then the kind of lack of reaction or whatever that I'm trying to capture, I felt just kind of summed up a little bit of what's happened to him in the past couple of months. But it is really difficult to capture whether it's just a decline or a decline in form or fatigue or what. You know what I mean? It's difficult.
Yeah, it's again, sounds like a cop out, but it's just so true. It could quite easily be a combination of all those things. Mane has Mane hit 30 yet? He's
No, he's 29.
29, just turned. So, it's more than feasible that he still has kind of a year or two at a very top level. He's still, you'd still expect him to have 1 or 2 years at the very top, given the play he's been. But it is a concern, because I agree, he does look, at the moment, he looks a long way away from the player he is, and he's really missing him. The best way you could probably say is he's just missing the actual attacking output. I think, the output that he's had as part of his game, alongside all the things that you touched on, the explosiveness, ability to impact things in between the lines, all that. He's always had output to go with it. That's what made him such a desirable player and, such a good Liverpool signing. But it feels like that output just fell off a cliff, and it could just be he's running really cold, as we say. But as you've just touched on, when you watch it, you see it. You see the issues. You see what's happened differently. The lack of explosiveness, decision making. It's all just out, and I don't know if that is just the cause of fatigue. It's really hard to call.
Yeah, I mean, how much of this could just be down to poor finishing, and poor finishing kind of, what's the word? It kind of it's almost contagious, really, isn't it? And if you start showcasing poor finishing, then how much of that impacts your ability to kind of stop doing your natural game? Your head drops without you even realising, almost, just to capture this poor finishing. We have spoken about this a few times, but this season in the Premier League, he's underperforming expected goals by 5.2 goals. Last season, he overperformed by 4.2. And the season before, he overperformed by 5.9. So the previous 2 seasons, Mane has basically finished his shots to an above average level. This season, the complete roles reverse, complete opposite, really. And it's, as I said, it's kind of out of nowhere. And how much of that will be impacting, his mental state, his execution, his tendency in certain moments to shoot rather than pass. I've noticed there was a moment yesterday. I think it was when I can't remember who he passed to, but he got played in. It was a really nice pass who played him in. I think it was Ryan Aldham actually who played a lobbed pass over the top, and he was 1-on-1 with, say, Militao. And I just maybe thought, previous Mane finds a way to shoot there, but he didn't. He made a pass probably in the direction of Salah or someone. So how much can poor finishing impact your game, impact your behaviour on the pitch? You almost, I mean, he hasn't stopped shooting. He's shooting more actually this season. I was looking at the numbers earlier. I don't know specifically in the past couple of months exactly, but this season in the Premier League, he's shooting about 3.1 times per 90. Last season, it was 2.5. So, I don't know. As I said, out of all the things that's happened this season, I find the Mane thing probably the most difficult to explain.
Yeah, and it's also coincided with Firmino continuing to fall off a cliff, finishing wise, hasn't it? And Salah, I actually haven't looked at Salah's up-to-date numbers. I assume he'll still be overperforming, but he must be some distance off what he has done previously. So, with penalties removed at very least. Now, sometimes the numbers can make a fool of you, making statements without looking. But Salah's definitely. Go on.
I was going to say, so Salah's overperforming in the Premier League this season by 1.1 goals. So not far off average, I suppose. Not far off normal. Last season he underperformed by 1.2. So for about 2 seasons in a row there, you'd say he's finished at average rate, normal standard. It's funny there looking at his debut season. His debut season in England, he overperformed by 10.2.
What was the season after
that? Season after that, he overperformed by 2.2.
Oh, right, okay. So he's beyond that first season where he was just insane, Suarez-esque levels. It's kind of, I guess he's just been on par, but maybe it can just look a little bit worse sometimes with Salah because he does tend to take a lot of chances, doesn't he? So, more than often he'll have at least one miss in a game that stands out, and that maybe sticks in your memory. But if all three players are having those kind of games on a consistent basis, then again it has a bigger impact in terms of what's happening with the team, and maybe adds a little bit of pressure on each other. If in the past, if you're Firmino and know that you're missing a chance, but you got Mane and Salah in such good form either side of you, then it's probably okay. But if all three know the other two in the trio aren't kind of converting at the same rate that they were, then maybe that adds that extra layer of pressure, which then impacts your decision making and some just little minute details like that.
So before we move on to Leeds, just kind of sum up then, Dave, I'm going to put you on the spot, just kind of sum up maybe, if you was in charge of Liverpool's recruitment, or if you was kind of overseeing Liverpool's football operations like Michael Edwards is at the minute, how are you judging, I suppose, what has happened and what might happen moving forward in terms of like how you fix that in the summer window and stuff, and what's your take on it?
I think in terms of answering the question on how I'd fix it in the summer window, that's tough, isn't it?
Not necessarily player wise, but
I know
positions, for example.
Yeah, I get I think I would be looking at the team. They definitely need a new forward, I think, in there. Maybe it could be a more traditional number 9 profile. And if so, that kind of might have a domino effect on how the team plays. And what I would say is, even if this has been a one-off season, with all these other, influencing factors that have all impacted Liverpool's ability to perform like they have in the 2 or 3 years previously, I still believe, even if that is the case, beyond next season, you'd be in a position where you definitely would need some form of rebuild and to change things, because you're another year down the line with this core group who are going to be most 30 and above, or at least in and around that number. For that reason, I would probably start putting the wheels in motion about trying to change things. Even if it's only a bit more of a gradual kind of rebuild or change of direction and amendments to the way the team plays, something, whatever the likes of Klopp, Edwards, and all that worked up between them. That's on them, isn't it? But I would start putting some wheels in motion, yeah, because as I said, even if this was a one-off campaign, I think it. Put this way, Josh, would you be shocked if Liverpool went and just kind of put in another 90-plus season next season with very little in the way of an injection of fresh faces or any sort of major change? I personally, I'll be honest, I would.
Yeah,
I'd be surprised. And when you put it like that, it makes more sense.
Yeah, that's probably a good way of putting it, to be honest. Like, if you look at this current team next season, with fans in the ground, with Van Dijk back in defence, and an actual defensive partner as well, what is the point seal of that team? And I don't really have an answer for that. I haven't really thought about it much. Dave just put me on the spot just then, but I don't think it's about maybe 85 to 90, is it? Maybe 85 to 95 in that region. But it's difficult to say. And I think when it comes to this sort of thing, as I said, I've tried to remain in the camp of it's just a mad season. Next season, when you have a pre-season, when you have fans in the ground, when you have actual centre-backs playing who are very good, I just feel like things will level out a bit more. But having said that, I still think some sort of new blood is needed. And I think a centre-back's needed. I think a forward is needed. Those two at the very least. And I think some of maybe the deadwood it's called, I think some of those could benefit from moving on, really, to raise funds for the new lads, but also, again, just to freshen the group up, just to bring in a bit of hunger, those players who haven't yet achieved. So, it's difficult to put a number on what winning does to you in terms of, I've now achieved everything I want to in my career. Is that hunger still there? You see that hunger kind of just go out of certain players' games, like, Dele Alli, for example. What's happened. And I don't think Liverpool players are generally like that, but the likes of Wijnaldum and Mane, they've won everything now. They've achieved everything they want to achieve. So, naturally, what does that do to your motivation? So, it's difficult one. I want to keep an eye on. And, before the end of the season, we'll see how we look in terms of spaces and that podcast-wise. But we could do a transfer committee pod at some point. We haven't done that yet. Just in terms of what we would do to the squad this summer if we were in charge. So look out for that one. But back to the Premier League anyway, we still have a job to do. We still have to get top 4. And we've actually won 3 in a row in the Premier League, but we've got Leeds United next, Dave. A team that is not an ideal side to face after you've just played midweek.
No.
Having said that, it's not till Monday, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you've got basically, what about 5 days rest, which is it 5 days? Hopefully your maths doesn't let me down there. It's not bad anyway, is it? Let's be honest. And yeah, it still looks a really tough team to face, and probably, in my opinion, one of the most difficult teams to predict in the Premier League in terms of results, because you never know what way it's going to go. You fancy Leeds to beat anyone, but you'd also wouldn't be surprised if they got beat by any side as well. I don't know if you feel the same, but it sums it up really. When they beat City last week, kind of a really big result. But then they've had a few kind of high-profile losses as well. Well, I say high-profile against teams situated near the foot of the table, but just in terms of style, really difficult side to play. Really in your face for 90 minutes, tons of pressure, and a team you kind of have to be really at it to overcome.
I didn't actually realise they've actually won 3 in a row, Dave.
Okay, so in good form.
All 3 have been 2-1 as well. They beat Fulham 2-1. In fact, the last 4 results have been strong. They drew 0-0 with Chelsea, and then 2-1 against Fulham, 2-1 against Sheffield United, and then obviously 2-1 against Manchester City. So they're in what seems like a good period. And yeah, I agree that you don't necessarily know which Leeds are going to turn up. And on their day they'll probably win 3-0. On a bad day they'll get beat 3-0. And I think it's interesting how they've been playing that way all season. And the current position that they're in suggests that they're very level, they're very bang average when they're not. They're either up here or down there, really. And what I mean by that is they're currently 10th in the league, so bang in the middle. And although they tend to score a lot and concede a lot, the goal difference is bang on 0. They've conceded 49, scored 49, so they are a really weird, unconventional team, Dave.
Yeah, I'm having a look now, and they're just a really good way to describe them. They're a very streaky side. So they tend to put together a few wins on the trot, and then they'll put together a few defeats on the trot as well. Funny enough, that point's captured by the fact that you've just pointed out they've won 3 on the trot. They haven't done that once so far this season. But they also haven't. Sorry, this is the first time they've done that this season. But they also haven't lost more than 2 on the trot either. So it's very much kind of a couple of wins, then maybe a draw, a couple of defeats, then back to wins, then draws, and just very, yo-yo up and down across the whole campaign. And that kind of sums up. Well, basically, that saying that we like to use about a game being a coin toss. The things that we just flagged there, the results, the goal difference being bang on the money. I think it's fairly similar in terms of the underlying expected numbers as well. Just captures a team that you just never know which way it's going to go with them. It's always a competitive game. Well, most of the time competitive game, but could just go either way, really, where they'll come out on top, or, as you said, they might get a little bit of a hard.
Yeah, I mean, they've actually scored the exact same number of non-penalty goals as Liverpool this season, which is quite... felt a little bit surprising, but I suppose it's not as well at the same time. Both teams have scored 44 non-penalty goals this season. West Ham are 3rd for non-penalty goals. Absolutely nuts campaign.
West Ham are legit, mate. Certainly this year, anyway.
The season's crazy. But in terms of expected goals, non-penalty expected goals per match, City top, Liverpool 2nd, and Leeds 3rd. Well, joint 3rd with Chelsea. So 2 very attacking teams, I suppose, is what I'm getting at. And on the defensive side of the game, this is where Leeds obviously fall down. If they could get their defence as good as their attack, they'd be competing at the very top of the league. But in terms of their defence, their non-penalty expected goals against per match ranks them 18th. According to the numbers, only Sheffield United and West Brom allow more in defence than Leeds. So it's one of them that Liverpool's attack could technically have a bit of a field day, I suppose, if the finishing's on point. But while also easily getting punished at the opposite end if the finishing isn't on point.
Yeah, and the thing is, we've talked about teams who have the potential to test Liverpool's defence. I'd put these as one of them, because the attack in numbers, don't they? They have good attacking players. In fact, we talked about it in the first one, and I think it was you that actually was the most vocal on it. How they tend to, get a lot of players in the box, which will test any defence. It's a problem.
I'll be honest, that's crossed my mind already. It's a concern, because I remember the first game of the season at Anfield. I remember how keen they were to attack the high line, they had, I distinctly remember writing a piece, and there was an image in the piece, and it was Liverpool's high line, obviously consistent of a back four, and the back four was occupied, I think, by 4 or 5 Leeds players who were also on the last line waiting to run in behind. And now you're probably going to have that same situation, but minus Van Dijk, minus Gomez, plus Kabak, plus Phillips. So that doesn't bode particularly well. And then obviously in that first game, Leeds didn't have Raphinha, who I've been really impressed with this season, Dave. We can't possibly finish the pod without talking about him, considering the Liverpool links.
Yeah, it looks like a player with a really high ceiling. Kind of, if you consider his age, I think he's about 24 now. He's kind of drifted under the radar in many ways. Or, admittedly, I wasn't watching him, at 2021. I don't know if he's just really developed into a top player over these last couple of years. But, he has a lot of traits that would suit Liverpool. He's already come into the Premier League and proven that he can compete at this level. Really good off the ball, really good with the ball. He's got attacking output as well, which is key. Just a lot to like, and you can see why Liverpool have been getting linked with him. I think he'd be a good move if Liverpool could get him.
Yeah, I'm gonna put the spotlight on myself here because I remember last season. Well, was it last season? It was during the first lockdown, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was supposed to. It was supposed to a year ago to around now.
Yeah, we created our alternative Liverpool 11, so we wanted the team to play exactly like Liverpool do if Liverpool's team didn't exist. And my Salah replacement was Raphinha because he's left-footed, fast, got output to his game, and then he moved to Leeds, and he's shown that he's got that about his game, and I do really like him. He ticks a lot of boxes. He's very, very intense player, really fast, lots of end product to his game. I think he's a lot more creative as well than he's given credit for. His ability to execute a pass that you probably didn't see is really, really good. He switches the play often and stuff. So his passing game, I think, is better than a lot of attacking players. A lot of forwards just tend to offer the penetration, dribble, and the goals, the assists, and maybe to a lesser extent. But Raphinha's really got a passing game to him. And as you said, he's only 24, so he's kind of approaching that peak age. I think Liverpool signed Salah and Mane and Firmino around the age of 24. I think Salah was 25. But it will be interesting to see if Liverpool make any sort of move there, because I'm not sure, how much he'd cost. I'm not sure what a team like Leeds would demand for a player like that. I'm not sure what the financial side of Leeds is like. They've only just been promoted from the Championship. But, we saw Wolves, for example, let Jota go for about 40 million. That I felt was very reasonable. I felt that was really fair. They could have charged us probably a little bit more. I think if it was Leicester, for example, and like a Harvey Barnes, I think Leicester would demand about 80 million. But I'm not sure what Leeds would demand.
Well, so he was bought, wasn't he, for around 17? And you think, 17, if you said to Leeds, now we'll double your money, 35, 40 million, I think they'd be inclined to take it, to be honest. I might get my eye wide. They might not, but doubling your money on a player who's had a really good season for you is good business. And if provided he can reinvest it, which Leeds do seem to be recruiting fairly well based on what they've done recently. You'd say that could be a move that would suit both parties.
I wonder if there would be any room for any sort of swap, considering Liverpool have got the likes of Origi, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Shaqiri. Specifically, I think Harry Wilson maybe has been linked with Leeds a little bit in the past. I think it would be interesting if Liverpool was to offer kind of a bit of a pick of the bunch in a way. Like I think Liverpool did similar buying Jota. I think, Keanu Hoover obviously went the opposite way for about 10 million. I do think that probably formed a similar negotiation. I think it was probably part of the talks. So, that could be a way of getting a player like that from a team like Leeds. He's contracted until 2024, so still another 3 years on his deal. So it's probably going to be a case of another season spent at Leeds, I think, maybe before he moves to any club. But I don't know if Liverpool fancy him that much. I do think he'd offer a lot for Liverpool, specifically when it comes to any staleness, any inability to break down a block or create chances. Raphinha's just naturally a creative player, and he's also really good from set pieces as well. His set pieces are ridiculous, David, at times, some of his deliveries.
Yeah, and that's something that you're talking about, maybe a Salah replacement. No, so I wouldn't say that's really within Salah's locker. Being that good from set pieces. All right, Alexander-Arnold's there, but if you do want to bring something different to set piece delivery, then he could. And Josh, low key as well. If you brought him in, okay, these players haven't yet got ability as high as the front three, but subtly you've replaced two of the front three there, haven't you? And Jota could potentially be like the Mane replacement. Raphinha would be like a Salah replacement. And as I said, within 2 moves, you've kind of it's a big task, but you've done 2 of 3. Who could obviously overtake them when they eventually get sold. So yeah, it would be a good move.
So thoughts on this one, then, Dave? Predictions?
Really hard to predict at the moment. I cannot. Liverpool, it was such a breeze last year, wasn't it? We just picked Liverpool to win every week, and they tended to do it. This year, really tough. I think it's the only thing Liverpool are playing for now. They'll be extra motivated. They've kind of come back from the dead a little bit, really, because it looked like Champions League qualification was done, and they wouldn't do it. But those victories have changed that. So I'm going to opt to go with the extra motivation to have something to show for the season, Champions League qualification, and for that reason, I'm going to back a Liverpool win, 2-0.
2-0. You think a clean sheet?
I do, yeah. Just because I wish I could justify it better, but I just fancy Liverpool to have a decent game against them.
Yeah, I'm a little bit torn on this one myself. I'm thinking there's lots of things to think about with this one, because obviously Leeds were really challenging Liverpool's high line in the first game, and Liverpool's high line is now more vulnerable than it was then. But then Leeds are quite a man-marking team. Well, they are a man-marking team. They man-mark across the pitch, and Liverpool. I've had quite varied success this season against man-marking schemes. Like, we faced Leeds in the first game, obviously, scored 4. Not long after that, we faced Atalanta and won 5-0. But then the return leg against Atalanta, we lost. Against Real Madrid aren't as man-marking, but they are that way inclined a little bit more. And we obviously got beat by Real Madrid 3-1. And then the second leg there, that was 0-0. So Liverpool coming up against man-marking schemes, I think should bode well. And I think it will be a front three of Jota, Mane, Salah, so that they can interchange a bit more than if Firmino was playing. Because the more you interchange, the more you cause man-marking systems problems, I suppose. But it's a difficult one to predict. Because you really don't know. You don't know what Leeds are going to turn up, never mind what Liverpool's going to turn up. So I'm going to go with 2-1 Liverpool, I think. But I would not be surprised if it was 2-2. It's a difficult one, this one. I think it'll be end-to-end. I think it'll be...
Yeah, I was going to say, it's the type of game where no result would truly surprise you, would it? The win, lose, or draw.
Yeah, it's... What I will say, I think both teams will probably generally relish facing an opponent like this, if you know what I mean. I think Liverpool will be glad to face a team like Leeds to an extent, and I think Leeds will be happy to face a team like Liverpool at the minute, given the weaknesses that we've got. So, but I'm intrigued to see what Bielsa comes up with, because I do feel like he'll probably exploit Liverpool's problems of late in some way. He's quite good at doing that. So yeah, hopefully Liverpool come up with a win, and we'll be back next week. So Dave, thanks for joining us, mate.
Yeah, thank you, mate. Cheers, everyone.